Brother Pete, how you doing?
Well, thank you.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where true health is wealth. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with us on this evening. And as always, we want to go around this table and introduce all of the great people that we have here and those who will be chiming in with us shortly. I'm going to start with my very own coworker, Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Douglas Graham, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone
Good
here?
evening, everyone. I'm Douglas Graham. I'm a retired physician who's been working in the representative's office for almost 2 years. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'll try and answer your questions if I can.
Simply outstanding, outstanding to our very own Dr. Pete Thomas. Dr. Pete, why don't you
Hey,
introduce yourself to everyone here?
hey, good evening, everybody. Happy to be back. Happy to have my brother, Dr. Hampton, back. We got one more to go, and we'll be all right. I'm blessed and favored to have the distinguished Congressman Danny Davis to have this forum for us to share with the community. And thank you, Nikki, for helping putting this thing together for us.
Oh, thank you so much. I see Wilbur Cook is here and he's saying that that's great. Wilbur Cook is also saying good evening to all of the gentlemen. You know, to the guy who says to our weight loss doctor, but the guy who says he really wants to be on Iron Chef, that's our very own Dr. Tony Hampton, who is feeling much better tonight, and he's here with us. Dr. Hampton, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Hampton here, family doctor, little expertise in obesity medicine, and I try to be as holistic as possible. Thankful to be here tonight. Definitely missed you guys last week's tummy wasn't happy, so I had to rest it, and I appreciate my team for holding the fort down. And I actually listened in a little bit while you guys were doing your thing. So, but just happy to be here, happy to and just thankful. When you have an upset stomach, you appreciate being healthy. You appreciate being able to show up. And so that's why it's so important is the things that we share, that you do those things so that you can show up for your family, your community, and your friends.
Simply outstanding. Want to say hey to Linda Johnson, who's here. She's saying good evening to everyone. Want to say hello to Curtis Jones, who is here with us. He's here. Hey, Curtis. He says good evening to everyone. To Sharon Grant, who is here with us. Sharon Grant says good evening to everyone. Dr. James Miller, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Oh,
Good, good. I'm Dr. James
Fantastic.
Miller, and I'm a internist, but I'm retired from clinical medicine, and happy to be able to join my esteemed colleagues and discuss some medical issues and try to heal the community.
Outstanding, outstanding. I see my good friend Dr. Reddy has joined us. Dr. Reddy, introduce yourself.
I'm Dr. Srinivas Reddy, a vascular interventional radiologist. I practice in Hinsdale, Illinois. I mostly do a lot of vein and vascular work.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Outstanding, outstanding. I see Edna Weatherspoon is here and she is saying good evening to all that is here with us on this evening. We do have a couple more docs who will be chiming in with us shortly. But none of this would be possible if it wasn't for the man who reminds us all the time that true health is wealth. That's what he does, and that's our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis. You're muted, Congressman. Unmute yourself.
What about now?
There we go. There we
All
go.
right. Well, let me tell you, I just got out of a taxi because I had to go to Baltimore in order to get here this evening. and the weather has been pretty inclement in many places throughout the country. And so planes have been late and planes have been canceled and flights have been doing all kinds of things. But it's a good day because I've spent a lot of time with doctors today. We had a tremendous session this morning down at the Chicago Medical Society discussing some proposed changes that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid are proposing to do that will affect how we pay or how we reimburse or how we provide fees. And so it was a very good discussion. I certainly enjoyed it. And I want to thank the Chicago Medical Society for hosting us this morning and all of those who participated. Of course, Dr. Miller was there, and so was Dr. Reddy. And it was just a tremendous group of physicians. Of course, we've been kind of talking a great deal this month about cancer. This is Cancer Awareness Month, and every place that I've been, people have been wearing pink. They've been wearing pink ribbons. They've been wearing pink gowns. They've been wearing pink suits and pink dresses. And so pink has been the color. And some of the discussions have just simply been tremendous. The Congressional Black Caucus devoted Friday of last week to breast cancer awareness, and we had some great discussions. I was out Sunday at the Proviso Baptist Church, and the governor gave the sermon Sunday morning out there, and he had some interesting things to say about what was taking place in the state of Illinois and what the state was doing as it relates to health care. The real deal is that the virus is still rampaging, not only throughout America, but throughout the universe. We had yesterday a good discussion with one of the African ambassadors, and of course, they are still seeking as much help as they can get from the more developed nations of the world, like the United States, because in many of their countries, very few individuals have been able to get the vaccine. And of course, we know that this is a worldwide problem. It's not a Illinois problem. It's not a United States problem. It's not a Chicago problem. And it's a world problem. And it's going to take a lot of unification, a lot of unified effort based on everything that I keep hearing and understanding. But we look forward to it because where there's life, there is hope. And where there is hope, there's possibility. And where there's possibility, there's probability. And as long as we have possibility, life, hope, and probability, in all likelihood, we're going to be able to do something about whatever the situation is. So let me thank everybody for being on. Please go right ahead. I am all ears and look forward to hearing what we've all got to say. Oh my goodness, Dr. Terry Mason.
Fantastic. I see Dr. Terry Mason is here.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Mason, introduce yourself.
Dr. Terry Mason, glad to be with my colleagues, and we have a great conversation tonight trying to help constituents of the congressional district that are great.
Well, we're glad to have him back since he spent a few of his days in a posh hotel called the hospital. We're glad that he is here with us on tonight. He'll pop back in. So, Dr. Miller and Dr. Reddy, why don't you guys lead our conversation tonight? Of course, we have questions. We're going to grab some of them, but we thought that what we were doing earlier today was just simply fantastic. I want to say hello to Mary Ballinger, who is here, and Sandale Scott, who is here and says hello to everyone. And Linda Johnson says, glad to see all of the doctors on. Dr. Miller, why don't you start us off? You're muted, Dr. Miller.
Conversation today was about cuts for Medicaid and Medicare that was reported to be as high as 20% for some of the specialists, especially, and this is for more outpatient kind of procedures that they are cutting the reimbursement for. This will impact patients being able to receive care in a timely manner, as well as uh, people getting the necessary procedures that they need at all in some cases more. And so Dr. Reddy is involved with vascular treatment and procedures, and he made a presentation. So why don't you go ahead and present some of the evidence that you have, Dr. Reddy, in terms of what it is that we're going to have to contend with or try to get reversed.
So one thing that I wanted to say and start the conversation is, we have all been experiencing once in a lifetime public health emergency. We all witnessed health disparities, uh, health disparities during this COVID crisis. We had seen some segments of population got much more, affected, and there was much more morbidity and mortality in terms of this COVID crisis. So this proposed care would impact office-based specialty care services. There are a lot of specialty services that we are able to do them in the office, which is a lot of cancer work, renal failure dialysis work, a lot of vascular work, peripheral vascular disease, uterine fibroid, treatment options, and a lot of leg venous ulcer or chronic venous disease. When we shift the care to the hospitals, the hospitals are already overburdened with the COVID crisis. There is the hospital employees are tired, overworked, and then there is actually a risk. When we force our seniors and most vulnerable uh, patient populations to the hospital, then there is a lot of risk. Definitely risk with the COVID, and there is a lot of delay of care, and putting a lot of pressure on hospital resources. One thing that we learned from the pandemic, we need to make sure our hospitals have sufficient resources to take care of the sickest. Unfortunately, there are patients suffering with peripheral vascular disease or cancer disease, renal failure. These are the cases, these are the patients that we could take care of them in the hospital, in the office-based setup, and so that we could allocate our resources to the most sick people, especially during this ongoing COVID pandemic. One of the things that I wanted to present, when you take the venous leg ulcers, we know black patients present with serious or severe form of venous insufficiency. Comparing to the white patients, the proposed cuts are about 22%. When you talk about the cancer, we know African, like black men have 111% more likely to die from prostate cancer, and black women are 39% more likely to die from breast cancer. They're proposing up to 18% cuts. Peripheral vascular disease, we see diabetes is rampant in certain communities. And when we look at this peripheral vascular disease, black Medicare beneficiaries are 3 times more likely to get leg amputations than any other communities. Talking about uterine fibroid disease, which is a debilitating disease, affects 3 times more black women. And these uterine fibroid disease, there are a lot of treatment options. If someone doesn't want to get a hysterectomy, We could do uterine fibroid embolizations in the hospital. The cuts are being proposed almost 18%.
Hmm.
So, the thing that I wanted to make a point is when we, you know, when we do these procedures in the hospital, actually it costs many more times than the office-based setup. So that's the thing that we were trying to bring it to Congressman's attention and take it to the United States Congress and make sure that they don't follow through these cuts.
Hmm.
Thank you.
One of the things that I can remember when I was in practice, that especially with those patients, those renal failure patients, oftentimes their graph or whatever we was dialyzing them through would often clog or fail, and it would be very difficult if they had to be scheduled at a hospital as opposed to if it was something
Yes.
that could be done as an outpatient, which was because if the patient wasn't able to get dialysis, ultimately they were going to end up sicker and they're going to end up in the hospital for longer periods of time getting an emergency dialysis, as opposed to if they could just be dialyzed on schedule by having this procedure done as an outpatient. And Dr. Chopra at the time was doing work with a lot of my patients, and we saved a lot of unnecessary hospital time by being able to schedule patient, get those procedures done. And if that is, I'm sure this is an ongoing problem, and if we're going to continue we have to go back to dealing with those issues and not being able to dialyze these people timely, and they end up in the hospital. The ultimate thing is that the money that they save, they're going to spend it on hospital stays and that kind of thing. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, let me ask a question. Is that one of the reasons why we saw the emergence of outpatient surgery centers? I know those became very popular a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw an influx of outpatient surgery centers. Is there any movement? Would these cuts affect these centers that
Yeah,
emerge?
that's what this proposal, Congressman. So when we say office-based specialist care, so certain things that we do in the office, and we have a mini surgery center like thing. See, there are certain there are there are names, like they have an office-based lab
Mm-hmm.
or surgery centers or something called ASC, which is all doing these procedures outside the hospital. And the cost, as Dr. Miller mentioned, I declare these fistulas and grafts all the time in my office. They come and I put them, if I can't, we put them dialysis catheter. If they have to go to the hospital, they sit in the emergency room for 2 to 3 hours, and then they have to go into the recovery room, then go into the like a angio suite and get it declotted, stay there for a couple of hours. It's a whole day thing.
Mm-hmm.
What we are trying to do with these outpatient surgery centers or office-based labs, they come, go into the room, declare them, they go back. So that's the main reason, that these have actually, you see them a lot, all over the country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just due to the whole mechanism of doing procedures, it's more economical to do them in the outpatient center or the surgery center than it is in a hospital, because just the process and the amount of red tape and in the hospital oftentimes will have emergency cases that go in that will so elective procedures get pushed aside,
Yes.
so so that's all of that will interfere with the ability to do an elective procedure, which they're always going to consider declogging a graft as an elective procedure. So even though for that particular situation there's some emergency to it, because if the patient does not get dialysis, then that can create a medical emergency. But on average, the cost is less if they can perform that procedure in the surgery center as opposed to in a hospital.
I'll comment. I think it's important um, that we all are stewards of our resources. I remember when the pandemic came through, there's nobody who was unaffected by. I think all of my colleagues took a pay cut. Our CEO cut his salary in half. And, so I'm okay with this ideal of we have to sometimes be stewards of our resources. What I struggle with is when I'm watching the news and when I'm hearing politicians and I'm hearing other leaders talk about where should our resources go. Um, I just think that our priorities are not in line. I mean, when I think about, I've always heard the military spending, for example. Probably the United States spends more than the next 9 or 10 countries combined.
Mhm.
Uh, and we have to secure our borders. We have to be safe. But the amount of money that we then fuss about that goes to communities of color, that goes towards paying a clinician to take care of that community, and we're going to fuss about that.
Hmm.
And then we don't fuss a lot about military spending that is exceeding what I think is necessary. I'm not an expert on the military and what our needs are as a country, but I just think that bothers me, and it should bother everybody that we would,
Yeah.
even with what the congressman has to deal with the current proposals for the infrastructure packages, that we have to fight for pennies. And we don't have to fight for other things, and it's shocking to me um, that we do that. So when you think about the cost of an amputation, way up to 50 or 60,000. When you think about some of the comments Dr. Reddy commented on, whether it's the amputation issue or even fibroids, even diabetes, it's all the same conditions. It's all metabolic syndrome. It's inflammation. We talked about metabolic syndrome. So my point of it is, if it costs about $16,000 a year to take care of a diabetic, but we should be spending money on how to prevent diabetes, how to prevent amputation. The inflammation is what leads to the fibroid. Syndrome ends up with fibroids. That same person with fibroids ends up with uterine cancer. That same person with uterine cancer ends up with heart disease. It's all the same disease. It's inflammation. So what we have to spend in this country is to understand these basic concepts, understand how to heal our patients with lifestyle, and we will save so much money. But I think our priorities are not there, and
Yeah.
I know that there's reasons for that. But the point of it is, we shouldn't have to end up at the table of Dr. Reddy. We shouldn't. And since we end up there, that's why we end up then having to cut, because it costs a lot to get to Dr. Reddy's table. But it would have been so much cheaper to say eat better, exercise, reduce stress. Those things, most of which are cheap or free. I just helped a family just recently. We talked about how with about $40 to $50, you can feed your whole family for a week. People think eating healthy is expensive. It's not that expensive. It's basic principles. And so I just think that that's where I struggle, Congressman, is that our priorities are backwards, and we then find ourselves pushed in a corner. And then instead of cutting the stuff we should be cutting, we cut the stuff that affects the people who need it the most.
Well, let me ask this question. We talk about health equity, we talk about health disparities. Is there any way for the population groups that we're talking about being below other groups to catch up? I'm thinking of an athlete who might be a block ahead and he's wearing some Air Jordan, and here's another guy who's a block behind and he's got some hip boots on and he's trying to catch up. Is can he ever catch up? Is there any? I mean, is there any hope
So the
in
internet,
terms of this business of equalizing health status? Are there any indicators
Yeah.
of anything where any of these low income minority groups that we talk about so often, where they're doing as well as other groups?
Well, Congressman, I just want to say, I think the key to catching up, if you will, if we're going to use that term, is going to be investing and not divesting, right? So, the by virtue of everything that Dr. Reddy said was absolutely on point, but you can't, when the cat is already out of the bag, patients are sick and they need help. And if, as primary care docs, if we can't get them into Dr. Reddy's office, because the patients are in pain, they're already sick. And to Dr. Hampton's point, I think it will require a lot of work on the front end. And to be honest, we need to continue to invest on that end. Also in technology, we have to utilize technology. Right now, my phone will tell me tomorrow morning, will wake me up and tell me you're 10 minutes from your destination. So my phone knows that where I go, which is the gym in the morning, I'm 10 minutes from the gym. Why doesn't the phone then tell me your blood sugar is running up? You need to go walk, and not just go walk, but tell me how much do I need to walk to bring my sugar down? Like, we have got to get to that level. Now, we're there. However, we haven't gotten to the implementation stage where patients have the technology in their possession, and then that technology is integrated within their medical team or care team, so that Dr. Hampton knows that Mrs. Jones is running 30% higher calories this week than she was last week. Like, that kind of data should be right in our hands. And so we're I think we can get there. We have to utilize the tools that we have. We have self-driving cars. You cannot tell me we can't use technology to help us take care of patients. Now, I'm not saying, I know artificial intelligence. There's a lot of my colleagues who they can't do it without us. I'm not saying you can program this computer to do things, but certainly that technology should be used to help us to take care of patients.
Yeah. Well, part of that also involves really, really intensive education.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of that education is that people have learned some bad habits.
Yep.
And so some of that is getting folks reprogrammed, re-educated in terms of how they conduct their lives and what they focus on a daily basis. So in order to catch up, it's like you can't um, keep putting your money in a pocket with a hole in it, otherwise it just keep falling out. So you got to close the pocket first. You got to close up the hole. And so when we are putting resources into areas where it's just going through, just running right through, then the effectiveness and the outcomes are not going to be as we desire. So we have to spend a lot more time doing the beginning things. In other words, when we take a child, if he doesn't learn his alphabet, he's not going to learn to read. I mean, those are some, you got to learn the basics first. And so we have to get back to basics. And getting back to basic it seems simple, but it's difficult because of the fact is that somebody is making a lot of money on things that people don't do correctly. And so they don't have so there's not a desire on the part of that individual, that company, to get everybody up to snuff and to get them living better and preventing them from having to take medications and to do all these other things. So there's a confrontation, there's a fight, there's a tug here going on that we have to figure out how we can overcome, because we can tell someone, but as soon as they get home and turn the TV on, all kinds of advertisements and things to get them to go exactly the opposite direction that they've just been instructed not to. So there's a whole bunch of things that we have to deal with. That is, the the information that Dr. Pete is talking about is going to the same area that the TV information is going to, and then it's not just him getting that particular information into the patient and they're now on the right track, but there are things that just continue to knock them off the track.
So we're
Yeah, just
filled with contradictions, and I mean, it's like we talk peace but practice war.
Yeah.
We talk love
Mm-hmm.
but practice hate. Uh, we talk civility but practice warfare. I mean, something different.
Yeah.
And I guess with health, it's pretty much the same way.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yes.
we model um, we're modeling even as we speak to our audience tonight. As a father, I'm modeling for my sons. As a healthcare leader and a physician, I model for my teams that I help lead and serve. So the problem is it's really based on models, and our belief systems come from those models. So, and I literally just today I released a video about the lottery, and the purpose of that video was to talk about how our belief systems affect what we end up doing. And I shared the idea that we've all been to the lottery line, and we've all seen a person in front of us spend 5, 10, 15, 20, $50 or more for a dream. And that was because of a belief system that our community and our community members, that was the only hope they had of creating generational wealth. But imagine if that little baby boy or girl were then led by people in the community that said, there's another way. And you have to be able to have a vision. And so what I tried to illustrate as I shared that story is that in 1974, when the lottery was created, that was 47 years ago. And if you just spend $5 a day, if you just take a 18-year-old who's going to retire at 65, right? It's $5 a day. But guess what, Congressman? In the stock market, the S&P 500, that's going to be $2.5 million when they retire. But so the dream is real. But if we've never been told that, if nobody ever held my hand and said, this is a better way. And by the way, if you take that 2.6 million, just live off of 7% and let the other keep growing, you'll have 180,000 in your pocket until you die. And you'll leave the rest of that money for your family. So the dream of being wealthy is possible. It only takes one generation. And you don't have to wait for, to win the lottery. We can do it now. And I just think that the knowledge that we lack in our community of these simple messages. People, they get upset, and I'm use Dr. Reddy. They'll say, Dr. Reddy, that ain't fair. His family came here and got rich in one generation. Well, guess what? You could have two. And that's a little bit of a stereotype, but people will say that. They'll say, why? They giving the money to Dr. Reddy. It's the craziest things you hear. They didn't gave it to him. No, he figured out that there's a way to acquire businesses. There's a way to acquire, a good education. There's a way to not put money in a freaking lottery, but to put it in the stock market or into real estate or into an investment. And we don't have enough people in our community teaching us. And every time I go into communities, you don't even see Black-owned businesses. So we have to start to teach these messages and let people know this is not a dream. This is very tangible. I grew up on Costner and Jackson. This is very possible for you. And we just have to teach that. And I think people just don't know these things. So our job, Congressman, is to show them the way and let them be comfortable. If you're patient and you allow time to work in your favor and then be okay. I think one of the things that people miss is that if you want to start a business, try to start 20 because most of them are going to fail. But guess what? You just need one or two to be successful and you'll be fine. So be okay. Be okay with the struggle, but know that if you just hang in there, if you're here to live another day, success will find you.
No, I agree with you, Dr. Hampton. So one of the examples that what I did in my practice, there are 5 employees. They worked with me for the last 10 years. Very nice guys. They didn't have any clue of how to save for a college plan. And I told them so many times, college education is very expensive, right? So one day what I did, I said $500 I'll give. I sat with them all, six of them, opened 529 plan. I put first $500. And I told them just put $50 per month. In 15 years, when the son is ready to go to college, that's a huge. I absolutely, educating people. And again, other thing is preventive medicine. If we could educate the communities with the preventive medicine, that's the best thing that we could do for all these chronic health conditions.
You know, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties that I had. Do you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
But I think that one of the things we can't do is ignore history. And what I mean by that is that what everybody is saying is correct for people who are normal, but we're not dealing with a normal population.
Yes.
We're dealing with the population who has been, particularly in some of the poor areas, has been systematically, purposefully disenfranchised. We did it with our social services early on with what was called welfare, where we incentivized women to have babies without a husband. We put people in concrete jungles that we had spread on the west and south sides of Chicago and did not support the notion of real families and what the leadership roles of men in the house were supposed to be and other roles that women had. And we made sure that the lowest quality food was also serving these communities. And because of the other major thing that we had to deal with that others may not, but it's self-hatred, which is a byproduct of our experience as I don't want to say slaves, but as people who are forced to work in this society. And I have to say that I don't know that we will judge integration or so-called integration as something that was good for us. And the reason I say that is, and I'll just give you one example. We're going to be we're writing and putting together. There was a book that was written at one time that we had over 400 Black hospitals in the United States. Today we have zero. Zero. So what does that mean? That means that the likelihood of somebody that looks like me coming into an institution and seeing somebody like me with a stethoscope or a coat or talking to them is markedly diminished. But even more important than that, even if that person could get through or into a school, the likelihood that he or she is going to be able to find a residency is even far more complicated because we had those places, those hospitals, those stores, those banks, those businesses that we used to have came out of the need because we couldn't get the money, we couldn't get the training anywhere else. And so I'm not sure that history will look back at the whole integration movement as something that was necessarily positive. And I'm going through that situation as I try to look at it critically myself. And so we have to think about, and integration is fine when you have people who both know themselves. So when you have people who have a history of their culture, their language and customs, and they can maintain those as they interact with others, that's different. That's not what we went through. We went through a process of more of an assimilation that was not met with success either. So I could stop there, but it's been something that's been brewing because as we've been looking at the question of how will we be judged, how will history judge the so-called integration movement, because it really didn't happen because we didn't try to integrate as equals. As you recall, early on, integration meant that I had to put chemical in my hair to make it look more presentable. And my wife or girlfriend or sister had to put chemicals in their hair. And that we've got skin bleaching cream as a $10 billion industry today. That is worldwide, not just here, but worldwide. So the psychological image of who we are and whose we are is very distorted by our own selves, because we've never really had that given to us in the way that it should have been. And even in our churches, our images of our deities and things of those natures did not look like us, nor did any of the authority figures. So I'm going to stop right there and get off of this bandwagon for right now. But I could not help but speak this truth, because this is in my mind. And when you look at our neighborhoods, I grew up in a neighborhood where everybody was family. Now you don't even see that anymore. At least I was in my old neighborhood yesterday. So you can't expect damaged people to behave normal.
Yeah.
And I think you're saying essentially what also physicians were saying this morning, because it was actually an agency that closed all the Black hospitals when a new set of standards were promulgated. And none of the Black hospitals that existed met the standard, the Flexner report. And so the Black hospitals didn't meet the standard. Therefore, they all went out of business or had to close because an agency said, we're going to upgrade standards for hospitals. And these didn't make it. So CMS is an agency now. And they've got some proposals that might force closure of some of these in-office practices, because if people can't get compensated, then obviously they won't be able to remain open. So it means that we have to challenge and not be afraid to challenge whatever is presented. And that's one of the good things about our country, is that you can challenge. I mean, you can challenge. You may not win every time you challenge, but you do have the right to challenge the determinations that are made by other experts. And you're an expert also, you just not with the agency.
So Dr. Mason, with the Flexner report, what were they trying to fix? Because I mean, like one of the things I learned as a leader in the healthcare industry is that be careful when you try to fix a problem that you don't create three more, right? So what were they trying to fix? And were they unaware that the solution that they were trying to fix was going to create a dearth of African American places to train their doctors?
Let me just say that, I'm not going to say that there were not some deficiencies, but having grown up having started practice at the tail end of that, when I was finishing my training at what was then called Michael Reese Hospital, which is long gone now, and was going out into practice. And the Providence Hospital had been reopened. And there were some others. I'm sure that Dr. Davis can remember a few on the west sides of the city of Chicago, Bethany and some others.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult for us because you say, yes, there were some issues, but the issues that Providence had and that many of the other hospitals had, once people had the opportunity to go to the other hospitals, we stopped coming to ours. And when they didn't come, and I can tell you, as a person who was on the staff at Providence, on the staff at Mercy, and I'll tell you a whole nother story about how I finally got to Michael Reese, which was another interesting thing. But many of our physicians weren't granted privileges at these hospitals. It took the Williams brothers, Charles and his brother Jasper, to sue Mercy Hospital to get privileges at Mercy Hospital. And even when I came to Mercy Hospital, had it not been for the persistence of the Williams brothers and some other people like the Richards and some other folks, I wouldn't have been admitted onto the hospital privileges at Mercy Hospital. I mean, getting privileges at Mercy Hospital. So it was not just, there was a number of things that were going on. And when African-American people, when we got to the point where we had good insurance that would allow us to even be considered to be admitted to a Michael Reese or some of the other hospitals around, that's where we wanted to go. And I don't blame us for wanting to go to those places, but it was very difficult when I first started to get us to come to a Providence, even if it was not just even for an outpatient procedure, which is a vestige of what I was speaking about earlier, which is the self-hatred. And the self-hatred is really not what it appears to be. The self-hatred is a reflective process that is caused by the impact of the global white supremacy that made everything that was not white inferior, not just here in this country, but all over the world. That's why I said right now, today, we have a $10 billion skin bleaching cream industry.
Yeah, you know, just like that mirror that you look in one mirror and it makes you look slim, but there's another one that makes you look a different size. And so it depends on what you're looking at in terms of how you view yourself. And I agree with that. I think that what Dr. Mason is pointing out, and I think I'll add another point to that, is that the support of those hospital systems, they weren't getting that. Those hospitals that were Black hospitals didn't get the kind of endowments and other things that they would need in order to be able to survive and to do a good job. So, it's so there are multi factors that went into their downfall and them not being able to really meet those standards that you're talking about. If you don't have the resources and then you're losing resources, that becomes a challenge.
Is that not the same as educators who teach in public systems but don't send their own children to them, or will not send their own children to them?
Yeah.
I recall when we were really starting the community health centers, the people who worked there oftentimes would not get their own care there that they were providing for other people. And I mean, we had to do some serious stuff in terms of pushing and promoting and suggesting that if these were good enough for the people you were treating, they ought to be good enough for you too. Yeah. I mean, that was the rationale that I used when I started getting my health care. I say, if I can work here and I think it's good enough for other people, it also should be good enough for me.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the ways that I ended up with Tim Evans and I becoming friends, because Tim's wife was working at that time at Miles Square when I worked in Miles Square. She was a physician, and of course we end up doing politics and that kind of stuff. But I really had worked with Tim's wife at the health center, and I got sick one day and went to her, and she treated me. But yeah, it's tough stuff. It really is this business of changing perceptions and convincing people that what's good for the goose can also be good for the gander. And I think of instances, Charles Drew, of course, died because he couldn't get a blood transfusion. And, he was the guy that did the stuff, but they had to take him to another place. And by the time he got there, it was a little late. And so, yeah, our country has a lot of transgressions to try and overcome.
But Congressman, I say this real quick. I'm sorry. No, I just want to say really quickly. We can see how this plays out every day with the number of our young people that are killing each other. And if we don't have the academic honesty to really talk about why that's happening. And I've asked some of these people, children, when I was on call as an administrator at County Hospital one evening, and between 3 and 7 p.m., we have 14 gunshots come through the door. And some of them, we got to the point where we had to post guards, armed guards, because if they found out the person that they shot wasn't dead, they might try and come into the unit to finish the job. I'm talking about the psychology of people who think like that about each other. That's what I'm talking about. And that psychology is what we skirt around. We don't want to talk about it directly. We want to make sure that we have nice, pleasant conversations, but we must have these honest conversations if we're going to move someplace and help our young people understand that they do have worth and that they do have value, and that I see it, you see it, other people see it. They're not just teaching material that ends up for the clinic services of the different hospitals, which is what has happened. When I go to the major metropolitan areas, you'll always find the teaching hospitals. That is where people will get an opportunity to operate on people, will have their opportunity. One of the largest such teaching hospitals is in Soweto, South Africa, a 6,000 bed hospital located right in Soweto. And the major training institutions send all their physicians from all the rest of South Africa to work there. Now, I'm not going to get into the intricacies of how all that works, but I'm just saying we've got to make sure that whatever we do or whatever structures that we put in place have to be honestly self-affirming, so that people will have a different view of who they are, and to your point, Congressman Davis, whose they are.
We're going to grab this question really quick it's an inbox question from Carol. Carol says, Congressman Davis, I have a statement and a question, and I will make them both very brief. I could have sworn that I heard the gentleman say proposed cuts of 22%. I just believe if any cuts start, that's just the beginning for them to cut a ton of things. Also, Congressman, if I was listening correctly to the doctor's speech, I really believe that this is saying that people of color, elderly people, and people with pre existing conditions are going to be on the back end of these cuts. Medicaid and Medicare, we will be simply hurt. What about patients who can only have open MRIs? The doctor was right. What about patients who need to go to these centers when they can't get an appointment at a hospital? Who wants to go to a hospital in the middle of a pandemic?
Mm.
Why would they bring up these types of cuts in the middle of a pandemic? People, please open your eyes. Don't let the smoke filled room guide you wrongly to know that this is all a farce. They're out to get us.
Mm.
I think sometimes laymen believe that individuals have more authority than they actually have. I'm saying, for example, we're in negotiations right now, and we've scaled down from what was proposed, way down. But the reason is we couldn't get the support to pass what is proposed. I'm saying we don't have as much appreciation for these processes. I'm saying, part of the idea that the majority will rule, but everybody in a group don't necessarily think the same way, even though they're in the same group. And so you're constantly advocating your position, trying to get that position to become the position of the group. I'm saying the president, I've heard him several times, and there are times when he has been talking like he was almost begging the legislators. I mean, he's look, say, look, y'all, say, here, understand so and so and so. And the people that he's been trying to convince have not been moving. I mean, he invited some people to his house, not the White House, but to his house over the weekend. Come on, let's have breakfast. I'll even cook if necessary. I'm saying this business of everybody having voice, and people make use of their voice. That's why you always have to try and convince enough people. I remember a friend of mine, John Lumpkin, who wrote a book, and he said, always bring a crowd. and what he was saying is that don't ever go anywhere by yourself trying to get something agreed to. Always bring a crowd, because there are people on the other side who just don't necessarily agree and see the issue. as you do.
Mhm.
And so it's a struggle all the time. I mean, I don't watch a lot of football, but I kind of felt bad for the young quarterback that the Bears have. Everybody talk about all the promise, but they've been beating him up pretty, pretty bad. And because he doesn't have a line to protect him, and all this promise that he showed at Ohio hasn't been able to come through yet, not with the Bears. And so it is a struggle. It's a fight all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I know you guys hate when I have to make this statement, but it is our time. So right as we begin to end our time, I am going to read just to let a couple people know that we noticed you here. We appreciate your support. And Pastor Foster, I will read your statement that you sent. And Pastor Foster says, whatever we need to do to make this not happen, I'm in, and I'll get all my pastor friends together. I read into this bill a little bit, and it came from a Florida man. Isn't this where they're not wearing masks at anyway? What are their thoughts on healthcare? You want to say hey to Mimi Bray Boy, who is here. She says, good evening to everyone. Betty Phelps is here. She says, good evening. Betty Phelps also says that lifestyles are extremely important and so true. Virginia Knight is here and she says, good evening to everyone and hello to all. And oh, wow, I'm so happy to see Dr. Mason is back. The power of our Father above. Bridget Baxter Campbell says, good evening to everyone. Mimi Boyberg says, facts. Curtis Jones says, true. Bonnie Schmetley says, facts. So true, Dr. Mason. And Dr. Mason, your niece is here. That's Miss Tamika Thomas. And she says, say it, Uncle Terry. As always, she's here and she brings along a clan of people with her when she is here. And we thank you so very much, Tamika, for chiming in and being here and bringing all your friends in. Linda Johnson says, so true. And Betty says, Dr. Mason, you are absolutely on point. So true. Leanne Harris said, preach. So I guess we're going to have to pass our collection plates around once again. And of course, Yolanda Williams is here with us. And basically, she is saying that middle class families are in need of help just as well. Just wanted to make sure that you all are educated because, as the congressman says all the time, true health is wealth. As we go around the table, as we do on every Monday night, we're going to ask you your thoughts until next Monday. Your thoughts until next Monday. Remember, as the congressman said, coronavirus is still here. Don't be asleep on that. Get your booster. They are available. Get your booster. Get your booster. If you have any questions and need to get a booster shot or find a location to do that as such, please feel free to even give our office a call. We have that information available for you. Dr. Douglas Graham, your thoughts until next Monday.
Well, yeah, it is the booster time, but we're also entering into flu season too. So please get your flu shot. It's good for every 6 months and older. It's going to help you stay safe and healthy this fall.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Reddy, your thoughts until next Monday. You're muted, Dr. Reddy.
I like to stress the point again about COVID-19 pandemic. As Congressman mentioned, we are not out of the woods quite yet. I think we should continue our campaign of the importance of getting vaccination. We still have, I don't know, 35, I don't know the exact numbers, but there are 35% of the people are still not vaccinated. This virus, we are hearing right now what is happening in the UK. There is a new strain is coming up, and that it's a matter of time we may get it here. So we got to educate the people. Vaccine is the only way out of this mess. Yes, let's get the flu shot, let's get the booster if who is eligible, but we got to convey the message. We Vaccine is the only way out of this mess, otherwise we're going to live with this virus for a long time.
Thank you so very much. Dr. Terry Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, always start with doing something to show yourself that you love yourself and that you love people that, other people as well. But when you do that, do the things that show that you love yourself to yourself and the people that look like you, whether they look like you or not, but especially if they do. Because we've got a long, long way to go. And with these cuts coming up, this is not a new thing for us. It's not new. We've always been on the short end of the stick, and we've survived and we managed to make it. And we'll continue to work together with those who think like we think and go forward. And yes, I got my booster and I got my flu shot. And remember, I just say to everybody who thinks that your flu shot or your boost, your vaccine is a personal thing. No, what you're doing is you're safeguarding your body from becoming a breeding ground for new viruses because the virus can't make itself. It needs a human to use its systems to reproduce itself. So it's not just about you. Just remember that.
Outstanding, Dr. Mason, outstanding. Dr. Tony Hampton, you're until next Monday.
I just want to just encourage everybody to think about what's important to you, what's important to your family, and just make that your priority every day. So it could be anything. It could be I want to have generational wealth. I want to make sure everybody's healthy. And the question is, when you start your day, are you going to start your day with that as the first thing you do? Or will you be distracted by the things that don't mean much? So I just encourage everybody to prioritize what's important. Um, I use something called the Eisenhower matrix, where I think about, is it urgent? Is it not urgent? Is it important? Is it not important? And you'd be surprised how we all have 24 hours in the day. But the successful people, they use their time differently and they prioritize what's important. And they do that first. It may be painful, but they do it first. So think about your priorities and is it urgent? Is it important? And if it's urgent and important, you need to do that first and leave that mall shopping stuff at a later time. And that's my final message.
You know, our okay. Simply fantastic, Dr. Hampton. Dr. James Miller, you're until next Monday. I better not see you in North Hempstead.
Well, I'm going to just one thing I always try to remember is that we have to not forget that get the basics. Basics, being decent to each other, being kind to each other, being kind to yourself, being concerned and caring about one another. All these kinds of things will lead you to make decisions that are the best decision that you can make, whether it be about the vaccine or whether it just be your interaction with other people. Because it seemed like we gotta get this war zone calm down a bit. I mean, just constantly everywhere you. I mean, you can't. I've gotten to the point I just can't. I can't look at the news really. I read the newspaper, but it's because it starts out it's just a complete war zone all over the community, and we have to calm this thing down. And the only way we're going to do that is that each individual is going to have to look and say, what can I do? Not really worry about what somebody else do. What can I do? Can I do something to show that my principles and my conviction is about doing something that is good for the whole and not just for me. That's my until next Monday.
All right. Dr. Pete Thomas, the man with the hat that everybody has asked about. They've been sending you text messages asking for this hat. So the man with the
Nick,
hat,
Nikki.
and Tony is gonna be in Oak Brook trying to find this hat
No,
tomorrow. So
listen.
when you guys see Dr. Hampton in Oak Brook Mall, take his picture and send it to me, please.
That's all this means is that I need a haircut. That's all. So I'm reminded that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And so, where there is no struggle, there is no progress. And so, I'm just encouraging my my colleagues on this panel, people that listen to us, we've got to demand better from ourselves personally, but also demand better of our community, demand better of our young brothers who are reacting, right? So a lot of what we hear is their reaction to fear, to being abandoned, to feeling like they don't belong. And so we got to let them know you do belong and you belong to us, but we want better from you. Okay? And so I want us to struggle, I want us to fight, and I'm with Dr. Reddy. We can't cancel no, we cannot have any, we're right where we need to be, but if we start cutting stuff, then guess what? All of those health disparities that we talk about, it's going to multiply. So we talking about like African American deaths, African American cancers, mortality and morbidity. Those things are going to continue to escalate unless we invest, unless we struggle, unless we fight.
All right, thank you so very much. Mary Ballinger says, thank you all tremendously. Another night of priceless and valuable information. Blessings upon you all and your loved ones. As always, we want to remind you to wear your face covering, social distance, and to wash those hands as always, which is so important. If you've noticed, like the doctors have told you before, even the flu numbers are down. You haven't heard any numbers about flu because people have been protecting themselves. So let's continue to do just that. Join us back here next Monday, same that time, same that channel. And we will have our closing remarks from our very own Congressman, the one who makes this possible for us on every Monday night to share with you and allow you to open up and share your thoughts with us here, our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District. That's Congressman Danny K. Davis.
Well, I mentioned that I went to church in person yesterday, and I was thinking of something that Paul said to his young friend Timothy, and he admonished him. He said, "Study to show thyself approved. A workman needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." And so I think we've heard a great deal of truth spoken tonight. And, you know, truth, Dr. King used to say that truth crushed to the earth will rise again. And he was fond of mentioning a philosopher who spoke of truth, who said that truth on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. And yet that scaffold sways the future, and in the shadows standeth God, keeping watch over his own. So truth crushed to the earth will rise again. And we always have to know that truth will outlive untruth. And a Yiddish proverb suggested that a half truth is really a lie. and, and so if you only deal with part of the truth and leaving the other part out, in essence, you're not conveying the truth at all. And the truth is that it is tough in a competitive environment. Democracy is a very competitive way of life. And that's because everybody have a right to project their own opinions and their own feelings about things. And a lot of people think that democracy just has a great deal to do with rights, but it also conveys responsibilities, and that each one of us have the responsibility to convey our truth and try and convince as many other people as we can that our truth is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And that's what we, we try and do. I hope that by next Monday we will have passed some meaningful legislation this week. And I also hope that by next Monday we won't be talking about shutting down the government, that we'll be talking about having enough resources to keep things moving so that we can come back and fight another day. So thank you, gentlemen, ladies, for a wonderful evening. And it's good to see you all. And I look forward to seeing you next Monday. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you all so much.
Good night.
Good night.